So I'm Anthony Galati. I'm the music director here at Never Apart, and I'm responsible for the programming here and the lecture series. And I work with Michael Venus and Dax De Silva. And basically, the premise for the talks is to do a program that works in conjunction with the parties that we throw here. And you know, Adam, you have a lot to say, and you have a history. And I mean, to begin at the beginning is a long time ago. 1989, would you say?
I'd say 90, a little bit more, but I know what was going on in 89.
Okay, so let's have you maybe start from post-graph years.
Yeah, I guess it all began. I mean, my official debut in the scene is 1990. That's when I first got my first DJ gig. But I was actually listening to like house in 88, 87. I used to work at a messenger company service in Manhattan when I was like 16, 17. And it was mostly African-American guys working there. And they were always playing a lot of like very, very early house stuff like Marshall Jefferson, Lee Body, and all this stuff from that time period. Mostly Chicago stuff. But also the radio in New York was playing a lot of the Todd Terry stuff, and my brother was DJing for years, from even prior to that. So he was doing his thing with the Bones breaks. My brother is Frankie Bones, if some of you don't know that. And you know, he used to actually DJ in a club in Staten Island with Lenny D, the famous Gamma DJ. Lenny used to actually make house records back in the late 80s, early 90s, and they had a residency in a club called The Wave in Staten Island. So in the summer of 1988, when I was painting a lot of graffiti on trains, we would often spend Saturday night before we would go painting Sunday morning in the club, listening to a lot of house and what was techno, but we knew it as house music, stuff like Derek May, like Strings of Life and stuff like this. And yeah, and hip house was really big at this time, like Fast Eddie and Tyree and all this, like, you know, Doug Lazy, all the stuff that had rap over like house beats and stuff. And that was the introduction of the music to me for what came later. Like, I was already aware of this stuff like French Kiss to Little Lewis, all this stuff. But in 1990, my brother opened up a record shop in Brooklyn called Groove Records. And actually, in '89, my brother was going to the UK a lot to play these crazy raves there. Like, he'd come home and show me videos of me and my mom, these raves with like 25,000 people. And everybody's just, you know, in unison. And, you know, New York was going through a very tough time in the 70s, 80s. New York was just a tough place where you couldn't even sometimes go to clubs without getting into fights with people. You know, I remember going to like teenage clubs when I was younger, and you know, you talk to a girl, and then there was another guy that was interested. You know, like, why are you talking to my girl for? You know, like, you know, and next thing you know, you get in a fist fight with people. And so, seeing these videos and of people all like just in unison at a party, black, white, especially, you know, in you know, a lot of the scene in London was based on, I mean, the UK was based on what was going on in London. And so people were going to what was called the orbital scene now, which is the orbital, the M25 highway, which they were doing raves like in fields all on the outside of this orbital. So you had the whole inner city of London going to these raves, and there was just no violence there, you know. And my brother was coming back telling me how this was and how he had this vision that he felt that he could break this music in America and do this. And so I started working in the shop. He opened the shop, knowing that the shop would be the first step to creating a scene. And so I pretty much started working there right away. I mean, I was actually painting a lot of trains at this time, and I was in a lot of problems with the police. You know, the graffiti scene in New York was very big from the 70s into the 80s, but the city had figured out a way to kill graffiti on the trains, like how to control it, and they ordered a lot of new trains, and they said that if graffiti was painted on the trains, that they would instantly take the train out of service, even if it delayed the passengers, and one by one, the train lines started getting less and less of graffiti. This started like in 83, 84, and then by 89, they were able to wipe it all out. But that didn't stop me and my friends from painting on the new trains. They just didn't really, they cleaned it very quick, but we were getting our photographs of it, and I had everything that I painted on the trains that never saw the public eye. I documented. But in the process of doing this, it brought a lot of heat on me and my friends. I mean, the cops were watching my house for endless hours. You can read a book called New York Graffiti by, I forget what's his name. His name is Eric Deal. it's a recent book from recent years, and you see one page where I'm talking about police surveillance, and they interviewed the head of the police vandal squad unit, and he's talking about how he watched my house on nights on end. I knew they were watching me. It was like a game of who's watching who, basically. And by 1990, they were always harassing me, the cops, and they were trying to pick me up for little stuff to try to get the big from me, but it wasn't happening yet. And so I kind of wanted a way out of that. And when my brother opened the shop up, because I was interested in the music and interested in what was going on there, I had never DJed, and I wasn't really like actively buying records. You know, as a kid, like any other kid, you buy music that you like here and there, but I listened to all kinds of music from electro from the 80s to, you know, hip hop to Black Sabbath is still like my all-time favorite band. So when I started to work in the shop and just help out around the store, I didn't really know anything about the artists that were making this music yet. But you know, people come in and you're playing records to people. They, oh, can you play that for me? Because they didn't have listening stations in shops back then. That didn't exist. Listening stations didn't really see in record stores still mid-90s. So when people came in, you had to play the records in them. And you know, you're sitting there and you're playing records to people, and then I'm like, wait a minute, that's not a mixtape that my brother gave me from like a year ago. So this is what this is. And you start making a connection, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm like, I really like that record, I gotta own it. And then you buy it, and then the record collection starts to develop, right? And then it's like, you know, there was still no real scene to DJ in New York. My brother was doing parties and playing in some clubs. And I went to LA in like mid-1990, and I went out to visit a friend that was also involved in the music scene out there, and you know, I went to a few parties with him, and people couldn't DJ, nobody was mixing. And I said, you know, I've been buying a lot of records in the recent months, and I'm out here buying records. I would love to actually, I feel like I could actually do what these people are doing. They're just playing records and letting it end and playing the next record. And he's like, you want to play them all night? And the next thing I know, I'm playing in front of 1,000 people first gig ever. And it was amazing. There was a guy, Stephen Levy, who wrote Moonshine records back in the 90s. And yeah, from that point on, I was hooked. My brother wouldn't really give me any tips, so I credit the tips coming from two producers who did some stuff. They would have been a really big team of guys, producers, and they worked for a minute. Howard Little from New York. They did records on New Groove, they had a record on RNS, and they were really up and coming. And years later, if you go on Discogs, you'll see that these guys' records are really in demand. And those guys lived in the housing projects about 2 streets away from where my record shop was with my brother. And they used to always come in and hang out, and they would give me DJ tips. And you know, next thing you know, he bought a mixer. I was mixing in the shop for a while, and I had it set up at home. It happened very quick. And then I kept getting booked in LA. They kept booking me to come back out there and play.
Because you could mix.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like it was really crazy that, you know, I say by 91 I actually learned how to mix okay, because I was around it every day. You know, I was really ready to do it. Yeah. Then I went actually to London and stuff and played there. And because my first record also came out in 1990. That's a good story. Because 2 guys that were working in the shop. One wasn't working in the shop yet, he worked later in the shop. A guy named Ray Love, that was kind of my brother's partner at the time. And another guy, Jimmy Crash, they were working in the studio on a project, and my brother was like, oh, you should go in there and work on it with them. Now me, I had no sense of like rhythmic structure of a track. I didn't know that, you know, 4 beats to a measure. I didn't really understand any of it. But I always had a good ear with stuff. And even my brother copied some ideas I told him. Like one time I told my brother, I was like, if I ever made a track, I would love to use like Giorgio Moroder, the chase with like a break beat behind it. And sure enough, he ripped my idea off. Put it out. It's called Pink Noise. It's my idea. Right? Because sampling was very big back then also. You have to remember that the culture of sampling in techno and house music was huge. Now it's kind of like, it's really looked down upon, even by me. I wouldn't, if somebody samples something, really? But back then, sampling was what we were doing, and that was a big part of the culture in house, hip hop, techno. And so we went in the studio and they compiled all these samples together. These guys had an idea, and I sat there and I was like, oh, well, maybe you should put a deeper bass in there, and maybe we should put this here or there. Still didn't really understand how the measure thing worked. Still, but I learned about that one session. My name is on the record, and I definitely had a lot of input in it. It's sort of like the producer or the director, you know, like, oh, yeah, do this and do this and do that.
Nice. Let's do it. So, Sonik Group. Sonik Group, Group Records.
Yep.
was techno ground zero for New York City, basically. And how did that turn into the storm wave stuff? How did that turn into storm? How did that turn into storm?
Well, just to elaborate, the record store was originally called Groove Records, and my brother owned that shop, and that was in Brooklyn, and that lasted until 1994. Then we had bigger eyes on bigger things, and because I was running the store, the other guy that was managing the store, he was out of the game by 92, and the store was running in the red a lot at that time. So I managed. My brother had the worst business skills when it came to accounting and stuff, and I was able to flip it around, and I got the store on the black. And in '94, Heather Hart, who used to do the Under One Sky fanzine, and who was a big part of what we were doing, and is one, is pretty much the first female techno DJ in America. She was dating me at the time, and we decided to add her into the mix. And me and Heather actually invested into the shop more than my brother did in Manhattan. And when we moved, we wanted to change the name to so we added the Sonik to the Group. I came up with that. But we didn't want to totally change the name. We wanted to just, take it up to the next step. So that's the history of the shop a little bit for those that don't know. In 1990, towards the end of the year, my brother had this idea to do a party, and these guys gutted out apartment in Brooklyn. It was called 1677 Cornell Avenue. That was the address. And the guy had nothing in his apartment, and we decided to invite like 70 people in his apartment. And we were partying on party supplies, and it was one of the first techno parties ever in New York, like a real where people just came. And we realized that we did another one or two there, and the word of mouth carried really quick. So we rented a generator, and then we took it up on these freight tracks where my brother and I grew up in this area, like sort of an industrial area in Brooklyn. And the next thing you know, you had 150 people. And the next thing you know, you had 200 people. And then it was, we're moving them around to different locations in Brooklyn. And the next thing you know, it's 300 people. And then we're like, oh, why don't we get a warehouse? Why don't we try a warehouse party? And then that's 1,000 people. I mean, it blossomed so quick. I mean, from late 1990, like December 1990 to, I would say June of 92 was one of the big ones we did. 3,500 people in a matter of, a year and a half. It's crazy. And then by September of 92, we did 5,000 people. And then we pulled the plug on it for a bit.
Okay, so maybe tell me, you got the magic touch. There we go. It's not yet. It's intimate. I was wondering, maybe how did the club culture of New York then affect what you were doing? Because I know in previous interviews you've talked about how you would affect Limelight more than Limelight would affect you, for example. But towards the end of the late 90s, was there a shift, or what were you noticing?
Well, I don't think there would have been an effect. It's not that there was an effect between what they were doing and what we were doing. It was just that they didn't like what we were doing, because this guy, who was like this infamous promoter, sleaze bag, he was just doing really things. Like, he got into the music through my brother and this guy, Lenny D, right? They took him to the UK, and he met the same people that my brother and them were friends with. And, he was doing parties in Staten Island for a while. And, I mean, it's a small market, right? It's not you gotta take a bridge and pay a toll to get there. And it's not like, it's very far off the beaten path from New York City. And he came into the limelight when another DJ, Charlie Casanova, was playing the main room. And Charlie was the first guy to play techno there, really. And Charlie wasn't working for he used to do the party in the back, in a smaller room. And his DJ Repeat, who used to buy records in my shop, was the DJ back there. And Repeat got all his records from us, right? And we had no problem with what they were doing. There was no jealousy, nothing. But the promoter, got really jealous when our party started to take off, because he wanted to be the kingpin of the scene in New York. And, both parties were taking off at the same time. Of course, you have a club that's in a church. It's a great venue. People are going to come. But of course, we're doing warehouse parties, and that's something people never experienced, and they're going to come. And we weren't doing it weekly. We were doing it every few weeks, every month, whatever. And he just got super jealous, and he put a hit out on my brother, and because he was connected in this club with gangster mafia guys. So my brother was going into his house one day, and 3 guys jumped him, pistol whipped him, beat him with a baseball bat, had like 100 stitches in his head. And you know, this guy did really bad things. I mean, he wound up being a snitch for the federal government. And you know, he's probably got a hit on him by a numerous amount of people. He routed a lot of people out. It was a big thing in New York. And it was, you know, you guys have all probably heard of like the Michael Alec situation with Party Monster. That was the other promoter that was doing the Wednesday there. So there was a lot of bad shit going on in there. You know, there was a lot of, it was pretty deviant stuff going on in this place. But Michael Alec didn't have nothing to do with us. He wasn't like matching up. I mean, Kioki was also DJing for Kioki was a good friend of ours. But you know, the owner and all these people were caught up in with a lot of bad people, and they didn't like what we were doing. And we even stepped on their turf in like, I guess it was in July of '92. I think it was September. No, July '92 actually it was. And we tried to do a party in Manhattan, and the fire marshals were there within the first hour. And we got word that they routed us out. You know, they knew when we did something that we would really might deplete their club on the weekend of people, and they didn't like that. But it's okay to send your DJs in my shop to buy the records.
When did it kind of like the club culture start to really change in New York, like post Giuliani? Like what was happening where all these people were kind of getting pushed up because of the cabaret laws and stuff, and how was that affecting the warehouse parties and your shop and all?
Well, in 1990, there was a thing called the Happy Lands fire. It was in the Bronx. It was in a social club for immigrants, mostly from Honduras. And a guy there had a fight with his girlfriend, and he left the club. And he came back and threw a Molotov cocktail in the doorway. And there was only one entrance out, and I think about 88 people died. And so the city soon set up a thing called the Social Club Task Force to crack down on illegal parties. But for some reason, up until like '93, they had no idea about the raves, and by '93 there was so many raves every weekend. There was stuff going on. There was numerous spots where in Brooklyn, Queens, warehouse parties, but then all of a sudden they got wind of it, and then they started to show up at a lot of parties, and they were cracking down on parties. But you could still get away with doing stuff for a while, you know, here and there, which is more risky. But parties still kept happening. And around '95, people started to try to do raves that were a little bit more legal, but in good spots. There was the Park Rave crew, and these guys did really good parties, and they actually let me do a lot of the bookings on the lineups for them. And you know, like places where like Electric Zoo in New York goes on, like in Randall's Island, they were doing parties in the soccer stadium, which doesn't even exist. I don't think it exists there anymore. No, it doesn't. They were doing parties in the soccer stadium. And you know, I booked a lineup of one. It was like Robin Hood, DJ Skull, and Patrick Pulsinger, and then like us, like a whole Sonik Group crew. And it was like 3,000-4,000 people there. And these were legal. And so they went in this direction for a while. And then there was a lot of buildings in New York there, like armories, where the National Guard, in a case of emergency, they will store tanks or whatever there. And these venues were really used a lot for parties. There's at least like 8 of them in New York, or 7. And so that's the direction it went in the mid-90s. But then, in the late 90s, Peter Jennings, a famous news broadcaster in America, did a special on primetime TV on Channel 7, ABC News, and it was an hour-long special on ecstasy in the rave scene. And when this documentary came out, it really alerted the federal authorities. There was a lot of people started to really be aware of ecstasy, the raves, and all of a sudden they just started cracking down. And the federal government, not even the local jurisdictions, passed this crack house law where if you did a party and someone was selling drugs in your party, that you could go to jail for it. And there was a famous case of a promoter in New Orleans, this guy Donnie, I forget the name of the production company that he was involved in. He's done hundreds of raves in New Orleans. He actually served time, from what I know, and they totally busted one of his parties, and I think he served some time pretty much. And so the raves really started to die out in America, and it was just, in New York, the scene was just dead. You know, there wasn't really the whole Limelight monopoly, because Peter Gation owned the Limelight, also owned the Palladium, he owned the Tunnel, he owned the US Club USA. You know, the only other club really going on at the time was Twyla, and they had their direction of what they were doing. So there was not really a lot of clubs pushing techno on a regular in New York. And, you know, after the whole Limelight debacle in the city, you know, they were not so quick to give permits to people to open clubs. And then they started to crack down using the cabaret laws to crack down further on parties, saying, oh, well, the noise can only be at 85 dB, you know, we have people living around here, community boards are complaining. They were doing whatever they could do to get rid of it. So by 1999, 2000, the scene went into bars, and little back rooms and bars. It was bad. It was really not a good time period.
Maybe to backtrack a bit too, maybe we talk about the emergence of Sonik Group Records as kind of like an international phenomenon and the emergence of Adam X.
Well, yeah, back to the emergence of, I guess we go with Sonik Group first. The emergence of Group was known when we went in Brooklyn. It was known. We had everybody popping in there. Like if they came in New York, Derek May, you know, it was all the old school guys like Eon, who did Spice, and all the famous techno records. Well, people always came in through, like, you know, Richie Morgan, Kenny Larkin, DBX, everybody. You know, we were known as the only techno shop in America, really. You know, not to say that there weren't other stores selling techno. I mean, of course, you got Gramophone in Chicago, Street Sounds in LA, Record Time in Detroit. But we were like solely focused on techno. That's all we carried. And yeah, when we moved in 1995 into Manhattan and we stepped it up, it was amazing. It was like a total. It was such a big change because so many more people came in the shop. And at the same time, it was the advent of the internet. And we were one of the first websites online to really push techno. And a lot of the guys that worked on the early Discogs, you know, like worked on Discogs very early on, just took a lot of information from our website because we were the first site where you could cross-reference artists. So like if, you know, Jeff Mills was involved in Underground Resistance or Final Cut, but you didn't know that, you just bought Jeff Mills' record and you liked it, you could look up his name, and when you looked up his name, all his aliases would come up. And you know, a lot of the early techno information on Discogs definitely came from the website. I used to go to Discogs meetings, so I know all the guys that did, you know, the early days work on Discogs, the guys that, unfortunately, a lot of them didn't get a lot of credit for what they built. And so, you know, with the advent of the internet, you know, board sales worldwide, it was a big thing. You can actually check out the website, believe it or not, it's really, I was not aware of this, but there's a website called web.archive.org, and they archive a lot of website stuff, and I never knew about this till a year ago. I'm in a friend's house, and another friend's like, we're talking about the old days, like now, and he's like, you know that you can still see the website from back then, and I was mind-blown that even some of the links were working. I mean, you get a lot of dead links on there, but you can see the layout. You can go back to like 96, 95 on that. It's pretty mind-blowing.
And maybe the Adam X stuff. Yeah.
And then the Adam X stuff, yeah. I mean, the first solo record I did was in '91. It's called Listen, and it's still kind of my biggest selling record to date. But you know, it's also a time when vinyl was selling a lot more. You know, so. And so I can't really say that for sure because much more people were buying records. But the record was, in my early days, I did a lot of sampling records because that's what I learned from my brother, and a lot of all the New York guys were doing it. Even Joey Beltram, who has made some of the most original, amazing stuff. His early works are all also a lot of sample-based stuff. You know, I still think sampling is a little bit of an art form, though I don't really mess with it. But yeah, the early records I did were sample-based rave records, and you know, by '92 I got a little bored of doing that, and I was striving for more originality, so I went and well, I was in Chicago for a gig in '92, and a guy had a 303 in the house that I went to, and I started playing with it, and I was like, this is amazing. So the minute I got back to New York, I found one for $50. And then I found another one a few weeks later for $150. And then, you know, I got a drum machine, I bought a 909, and the next thing I know, I'm making acid tracks. And by '92, yeah, I put out my, what's the name of this record? Oh, The Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dweller. So Direct Drop Records. And that's, it's all acid, it's all original stuff. I mean, I might have took some vocal samples from various things.
And from there, you know, that was it. I got really into hardware throughout the 90s into the early 2000s. And it put out a lot of records on the, you know, Adam X. I also worked with a guy named Jimmy Crash, who was a DJ on the Storm Rave circuit. And we made a project called X Crash, which a lot of acid records came out on, mostly on his label Direct Drive, but even on Peace Frog from the UK. And then, you know, then I kept working on mostly my solo stuff, really. Didn't really partner up with many people over the years. And yeah, I guess in 2005 I switched over and went into the digital world with Ableton, and that's where I'm at now.
Very curious because you talk a lot about how, you know, once minimal techno became the thing, you were kind of ostracized in the scene insofar as you didn't really adopt the deep after-hours practices of what was popping at the time. You were still very much EBM influenced and industrial, and what was coined at the time, I guess, as noise rhythm. So, and there's not really much said about this period of time, so I'm curious, like, when this was happening, you were playing very small, specific parties. What was that like for you?
It was definitely a strange period for me. It was kind of upsetting because, you know, I'm used to playing really big parties, and, you know, now there's no techno scene. It's like, what happened? You know, it was there one minute, gone the next, and you know, this new form of music that was this new genre of techno that was around. Just to me, wasn't the right music. It was music for an after party, and I liked a lot of that stuff early on, like in the late '90s. Some of the early Prolong stuff, Baby Ford, all that stuff was good. It was Mike King Studio One. But, you know, this was stuff, I bought these records, but I never played them at gigs. If you look at my copies of them now, they're mint, because I never played them at, they just didn't fit into a primetime techno set to me. And, you know, I was just looking for new stuff. Hello? Yeah, I was just looking for new stuff, and, you know, I was having a hard time finding harder techno records, so I delved more into the industrial thing, and, you know, it was a fun period too, though, because it was something new for me that I hadn't experienced, and it made me a little bit more humble to what I experienced 10 years before, where I'm, you know, now I'm going to parties where people don't even know who I am, you know, like I'm popping up and I'm coming up as an up-and-coming guy in a scene that I was not part of, you know, and that was hard because those people in the industrial scene are very, very close to outsiders, and, you know, it took a few years of, you know, being involved in the scene and people seeing me around, and then seeing that I have, you know, music coming out on some of the bigger labels in the scene, and then, you know, then I got my respect in it, you know, and, you know, it was an interesting run. I have no regrets at all. I'm glad I did it, you know.
So this would have been, I guess, mid 2000s, and mid 2000s, and you were still living in New York City. So I guess a lot of people also describe the mid 2000s in New York City, the club culture was kind of waning. So between that, and I guess, you know, what was going on with you in your career, what was sort of the long-term decision to like go to Berlin? What prompted everything besides all that other stuff? I mean, Berlin was obviously happening at that time.
Well, I went to Berlin. What made me go to Berlin is my record shop closed in 2004. I mean, it was a really tough time after 9/11. I mean, you had, you know, when you're in a major city like New York or even in Berlin, you know, and you own a record shop, you can rely that most of half of your business is tourists, if not even more. I mean, I talked to other guys in Berlin in the shops, and they say the same thing. So imagine after 9/11 and the way they shut everything down, and, you know, that was like the really first major terrorist attack of the modern day here, you know, like in North America, let's say, or in the world for the most part, you know. And so no one came to New York after this. I mean, the tourist business was dead. And so now you just lost 60% of your business. Now imagine the people that actually live in New York that were buying records. I mean, you know, people were afraid of the future. People were afraid that we're going into war. They want to hold on to their money. You know, they don't know what's going on. Nobody knows. So now all of a sudden you got like 30% of your business going on, and, you know, you have high rents in New York, and it was really like killing us. And then the landlord pushed the rent up. And then we were like, all right, we're gonna have to move to another location. And we were thinking to close, but I was like, I don't like to quit. I'm not a quitter, you know. And then we moved to the Lower East Side, but like on Avenue B, which is like towards the end. And
I would work in that shop and no one would come in. We went from a shop that, you know, had 6, 7 people working for us to where I was the only one there. Even my business partners weren't coming to work, Heather and Frankie. And I'd have to put a sign on the door if I had to go do a mail order at the post office. And it was just got to the point where I was like, this is like beating a dead horse. And, you know, I got partners that are not showing up at work, and, you know, there's no one here, and we're just digging deeper into our pockets, but yet we're getting more in debt. So I just pulled the plug. So that was in October 2004. So 2005, 6, I was kind of a little bit in a state of limbo, which is the name of one of my albums, right? And I did a DJ little tour, I did a little DJ tour in Europe. I think it was in 2006. And I went to Berlin, and I hadn't been there in some years. And I just loved what I saw there, and I was like, you know what? When I got to the airport, I had to go play another gig in England. So I went to Schonefeld, a small airport. And I didn't want to leave, and I never felt like that before. I was always a New Yorker at heart, you know, not always gonna stay here. And then, I don't know, I had this feeling like, I don't want to leave. And I never had that feeling before, and it just clicked. I'm like, it's time for me. It's time for me to get out of New York. And that's how I wound up there 7 months ago.
So I'm curious, when you got to New York, I mean, or to Berlin rather, you at that time had a career of roughly 17 years, and you made all these connections, and you'd been to Berlin quite a bit. Was it one of those cases where you were assimilated very quickly, or was it the same kind of pushback like you experienced in the industrial scene, where it was kind of like, who's this outside?
Actually, when I moved to Berlin, it moved pretty quick, and it was kind of weird because Minimal, the guy that doesn't like Minimal, moves to the biggest place for Minimal. I mean, it was massive. It was the peak of Minimal, right? But when I got there, yeah, it wasn't really getting gigs there right away. I was getting some gigs in other places outside of Berlin. But within 2 months, I met the owner of a club called Maria. And Maria was one of the biggest clubs in Berlin at the time, from like the early 2000s. It was a big club. It fits like 1,500 people, 2,000 people, has many different rooms. And I met the owner, and the owner was doing very different stuff there. It was not like, they didn't have like a regular program every week. It was almost more like you could do live shows there, like cabaret stuff, but it was also a techno club. But they did everything. They did house, minimal, techno, whatever. I mean, even Trezor, when Trezor was closed for some years in between the move to their new location, they were doing events in there. And when I met the owner, he was super cool, and I had suggested an idea to do like kind of like a techno EBM party with mostly techno artists, but with a girl who was doing some of the biggest industrial events in Berlin, named Nadia. She was doing the Schlagstraum parties, and she's a friend of mine. And she was also the girlfriend of Monolith, who's on my label, he's an industrial like pioneer legend. He's known for that project Absolute Body Control, which was like a big minimal synth project from the 80s. And then he was in The Clinic, which is a very legendary EBM band from Belgium. And he's had his hands in a lot of stuff over the years. He's kind of continually been in that scene for years on end. And so I already had the connection with her through him, because we were already friends, and I already brought him to the States to play. And, you know, I recorded an album for his label. And so we did this party. The idea of it was to get the techno people, the industrial people, to get into this techno side of EBM, because there was some people making it, like Thomas Heckman, you know, the Horrorist, Terrence Fixima, me, a few people that were still pushing this sound. And we did the first party there. I talked the owner into doing it, and I had the Horrorist play with Thomas Heckman and me. We all played live, and I DJ'd. And my friend Dottie, she pulled a nice crowd, and then her DJs from her party played in the other room, and played more like rhythmic noise and experimental stuff. And we wound up pulling 700 people on the party, and the owner was very happy about it. And then we just formed a really good relationship. And I did a total of 30 parties there over like a 2.5 year period. 5 or 6 with my friend Nadia, but I was also doing electro events, because I was very into electro in the decade. You know, like there was a lot of good stuff coming out at this time, like Carl Finwell, Skate One, you know, Dynarec from France. There was a lot of good electro, but there wasn't really a scene for it. It was very, very small. So I started to try to bring some of those guys in on another party I was doing called Electros and Wires, and booking them. But I was also doing stuff like IDM stuff, like I booked like Black Dog and Crow to Georgia on B12 on a night. So all of a sudden we do all kinds of stuff, and some parties weren't really happening that well, and some were doing really well. The Cross and Power parties always did well. And you know, from doing these parties, and all the promoters in Berlin wanted to book me, and then, you know, since it's a big tourist city, other people come from everywhere, and then, you know, gigs were growing and growing. And then 2009 was the Renaissance period for techno. You know, like, Berghain was bubbling up. You know, in Berghain, when I first started going to Berghain, they were actually still playing a bit more of this kind of harder minimal sound downstairs. And, you know, Ben Clark and Marcel Detman were residents, but they didn't play every weekend. And they were the only guys, and Marcel Feng were the only guys really playing, like, straight techno, where they were playing a lot of old school stuff because there wasn't that much new techno out, right? And, you know, you could see what was bubbling there. There was something bubbling, you know. People were getting bored of this minimal thing. People wanted harder music. And then I would say 2009, you started to see a lot of like self-released techno projects. Like I did the Traversal Wormhole project. You had guys like Milton Bradley doing Do Not Resist the Beat, Ancient Methods. And you could see that there was people were really picking up on this stuff. And people like the anonymity factor, the anonymous factor to it. Because techno at the point before was so saturated with just big names all the time, and the same people in the press and the media all the time, that people wanted something new. You could feel that energy, you know. And this is a really special period in Berlin, and you know, because it still didn't break everywhere else. And you know, actually, what happened there 5-6 years ago is didn't start to even break into some places until 2-3 years ago. You know, the shockwave of it. You know, like now if you go to Italy they're techno crazy there. Every little city in Italy, that's a hotspot for all of us who play techno in Europe. If you talk to any of the main techno guys, everybody's like, we play in Italy like 30 times a year. You know, and you know, prior to that, Italy, I hadn't even been to Italy for a gig. In all the years I played, never got booked there because it was not, techno was not really, you know, minimal was big, house was big. So this era in Berlin, I really point 2009, 2010 was a really special time period there, and it was, I call it the Renaissance period.
You talk about sometimes about how going to Berghain, you know, kind of informed the traversable wormhole material. I guess beyond the environment itself, what really pushed you to go like kind of stripped back and minimalistic? Because I mean the material is quite sparse, but everything has a function. So I'm just wondering like how the actual space kind of made you to produce this kind of music.
Well, it all stems back from the early 90s and the parties that we used to do. I always liked to play the last sets a lot of the time. Sometimes I like to play in the middle, the peak, but I always like to also play like deeper, like more after hours style music as well. And you know, like I said earlier, like minimal did have its place, especially in the 98 period. You know, this music was really good. Like it would be something I would play at an after party. I think it just got really cheesed out, you know, later. The stuff that I was doing that was more stripped down was definitely much more harder edge, broken beat, you know, experimental. And I got that vibe from being in Berghain. You know, I'd go to Berghain on a Saturday morning, like at, you know, well, Sunday morning really, like, you know, like 5, 6 in the morning. And this is when like Ben and Marcel, they used to play really long sets there. And, you know, they just take you on a journey. And, you know, I sit there and think, you know, what would I make that they would play at this time in the morning? Like, what, you know, I have some ideas, and then I just went for it. You know, what was in my head? I wanted to do some like deep kind of sci-fi techno, you know, and yeah, it worked. I just put it out anonymously, and yeah, it worked real quick.
So following on the success of Traversable Wormhole, you know, it prompted a few other projects in the ADMX 71 stuff, which we discussed earlier, is kind of your more slow-paced, I guess, opening kind of stuff, we'll call it. What kind of leverage did the Traversable Wormhole stuff give you, or the confidence, rather, to go even weirder?
Yeah, good question. Because, you know, when I used to just record really under my own name as Adam X for many years, and I felt like when I would do albums, if I wanted to go off into one direction too much, then, you know, you get a stigma when you do that, and people that like harder techno, think, oh, I'm not gonna listen to that because, you know, I know this is gonna be all this other stuff. So I wanted to start splitting up the projects. I thought this would be a better way to do it. And if you listen to the last album, the second to last album, State of Limbo from me, you can hear there's like an ambient track on there, there's some electro. I really like that album a lot. I think it's one of my favorite pieces of work that I've done. But I wanted to break it up a little bit more. I thought that I should do different projects because I want to dig deeper into a sound like Traversal Wormhole, like more sci-fi techno, but I still also want to make more rhythmic noise, horror, industrial techno. And I thought that to do all this stuff, it would be better off to break it up into different sections of, you know, artist names. And the ADMX thing is something I really enjoy doing because it's very, very freeform. You just sit down and you just start playing with stuff, and it's not making music to make music for a dance floor. And sometimes it's almost easier to make music that's experimental than to make music for a dance floor, because when you make music for a dance floor and you strive for originality, it's tough. You're working in a beat structure, you're trying to make people dance, you don't want to lose a dance floor, and you know, you don't want to sound like everybody else either, or at least I don't. I mean, some people like to copy other people's work, and you know, you got a lot of people that like to clone on someone else's sound, but I don't like to do that. And so when I'm working on harder techno stuff, it takes me a lot longer. So really, it gets stuck in my head sometimes with it.
What I find interesting, I mean, from the records that you've put out in the past 2-3 years, is that I feel like the Traversal Wormhole and ADMX stuff has actually informed your output as ADMX, insofar as a lot of it's, again, stripped down, hypnotic. Even though it pushes a little harder, it still kind of has this like new gen kind of feel to it. So I'm curious, when you approach something in the studio as ADMX, are you still bringing kind of the other influences to the table as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, any artist is going to have their signature sound for the most part, right? So, you know, there's definitely elements of each and all the projects. It's there. You know, you can listen to Traversal Wormhole, you can hear with ADMX in it, or you can hear with ADMX and ADMX 7.1, or vice versa. But the best way with ADMX 7.1 is it's always down tempo. So it's never higher than like 115, 116 beats per minute. It's usually lower. So that automatically puts that in a different category right there. But Traversal Wormhole and ADMX, I can run into each other, but I'm not so focused on the Traversal Wormhole project. I really wanted this to break it down more into one project to play out as like hard techno that, you know, for the dance floor, and then the other one more experimental to play, you know, more for festival experimental events, and not to play that in a normal club setting. That was the idea, to really have the two. Of course, I have other projects under different names, like I have to do the X-Crush project for the corner, which is like acid techno, harder stuff. So, you know, and then there's another project I did called Mass Exodus, where there's one record out, and that's more like rhythmic noise, industrial. But sometimes you just make different names because you don't want to have the same stuff out. You know, you don't want to use the same name over and over and kind of. It's better to change it up.
Yeah.
This thing.
We're gonna beat it up after. Actually, the first and only time I've seen you live was as Traversal Wormhole after Richie Houghton played Plastic Man 4 years ago at New Tech. And you have a very like significant history in Montreal as far as you know, playing some of the first raves, like you were saying, the Surface Crew and I mean Vertiga stuff. I mean, is there a particular highlight for kind of like Montreal party memories that you have?
Well, I always love playing here. As I told you when you picked me up from the airport, I've never had a bad gig here. To say what the highlight gig is, I mean, I've played some great ones at Sonar and Area, you know, the Fractal Surface party in '94. But the New Tech one was big. That was big. Because, you know, I'm playing after the headliner, which I guess if you play after the headliner, aren't you the headliner? I don't know, but I was playing after the Plastic Man, and I was telling you, as I told you in the car when we were driving here, my expectations were a little bit shattered for a minute, because when I walked into the venue on the day of New Tech when we were playing, I was with Deep Core, who played on the same bill that night.
And I was asking the guys from MeTech, like, okay, so what are you guys gonna do for visuals? And they were like, well, there's not gonna be any. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, look at the Plastic Man rig right there. We can't really do anything when it's massive, right? And I'm like, so there's not gonna be any lights here? And they're like, well, we have these lights over here, but they were very like old school, like tube light with like filters on them. And I was like, well, that's not gonna work. And I'm like, so what are we doing here? I'm like, you know what we're gonna do? We're just gonna put a light bulb on me, just a light, and venue stock. And I'm sitting there like, how's this gonna work? This guy's got a full LED rig, and you know, how do I play after this? You know? And he's Richie Horton, and you know, he's got this huge fan base, but I don't know how that worked. It was amazing. When I finished, I had chills up and down my whole body from that gig. It was definitely one of the top experiences for me.
Well, it's been 4 years, I guess, since you've been, well, almost 5 now, since you've been here. So I'm excited to do another one for you tonight. We'll add it to the bill, and we won't let you down. Thanks everyone for coming out, and